My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Thor, Love, and Thunder. And this is a movie that I was not excited for. Ever since Endgame ended, I've kind of lost all interest in the MCU. I didn't care for any of the TV shows I've seen of theirs. I didn't care for Black Widow, Shang-Chi, or the Eternals at all. I thought Spider-Man No Way Home was decent. I loved Doctor Strange too. But the trailers for this movie made it look really awful. Like, I did not like Thor Ragnarok because that movie is so heavily reliant on these jokes that undercut any bit of dramatic weight that it has. So I was just like, I doubt this movie is going to be any good. And this movie manages to be both better than I was expecting and worse than I was expecting at the same time. Like, this movie is the very definition of a mixed bag. I hated like 70% of this movie. But I also loved the other 30%. And it's never in the middle. There was no scene that I was watching where I'm like, okay, this is decent. I either hated this movie and wasn't enjoying it at all, or I was absolutely loving it. And it just makes for some very complex feelings. Taika Waititi has proven that he can be a good director. I think Jojo Rabbit is easily his best movie. The way he balances comedy and drama in that movie is incredibly well done. And you don't get that here. This movie has so much comedy that it's just unbearable. This movie is never funny. I didn't laugh a single time. But every 20 seconds, there's another joke. And it just gets really annoying after a while. You know, just like stop making a joke. Like, it got to the point where it started to feel like a spoof movie. Like, remember those spoof movies in the 2000s, like Disaster Movie and Epic Movie and Date Movie and Meet the Spartans? It started to feel like that. And I absolutely hated that element of this movie. And on top of that, the first act of this movie is just unbearable. Like, not just the jokes, but the overall structure is just a complete mess. Like, I love the Guardians of the Galaxy, but I don't think they needed to be in this movie at all. You've kind of cut and shifted around a bunch of scenes for a much better paced movie. The way that Jane gets her powers just made zero sense to me. Like, she just goes over to the hammer and suddenly she's worthy of the power of Thor. It's just like, isn't there a scene in Avengers 2 where nobody but Thor lifted the hammer? And then in Endgame, we get that moment where Cap gets to lift the hammer, and it's such a huge moment because no one else but Thor gets to lift it. So I feel like by giving her the powers in the way that they do, they kind of undercut some of that. And on top of that, this movie also has this annoying subplot of Thor's axe being jealous of Mjolnir, and it's really stupid. And then you've got these screaming goats, which reminded me of that one video that came out a few years ago where there was a Taylor Swift song playing, but anytime she did, there would be a goat being like, oh, and it's supposed to be really funny, but I hated it then, I hate it now, and it's present throughout so much of this movie. And I hated the way they treated Asgard. Like, they kind of treat it like a tourist attraction now, and it's just like, oh my goodness. I just hated it. And you also got these people who are captured, and not once do you feel like they're in any actual danger. It never even looks like they're captured. So I was hating this movie to begin with. I'm like, this might be the worst Marvel movie, but it eventually finds its footing, and it finds a way to explore really heavy, complex ideas like absent gods and how gods just leave humans to suffer and how that can result in evil. And I think that idea is absolutely brilliant. And I love what we got of it, but I would have loved more of it. And then you also got this whole element of our desire for love and how when you open yourself up to someone, you risk getting hurt. And then also the importance of living a short, meaningful life over a long life where you just do nothing. And there's so many great ideas, and they do come together, but you have to go through a lot of shit to get to all the good. And I'm just so torn on this movie. Completely torn. But let's talk about the cast. First with Chris Hemsworth, who is a very mixed bag for me in this movie. When he's trying to be funny, I just think it falls flat. They dumped him down to the highest of degrees, and he's just a complete idiot. But then when he's dealing with the more emotional aspects of his character, he does a really good job. Natalie Portman I thought was bland and really forgettable for the first 2 acts, but she gets better in the last act of this movie. Tessa Thompson, I see a lot of hate for her. I think she's very charismatic. She's not a great actress, but I do like the screen presence she has. Then you've got Taika Waititi as Korg, who I think should have just stayed as a supporting character. Having him as a main character, it's just too much. I just couldn't stand him after a certain while. And there's one thing they do with his character that I really hated. You also got Russell Crowe as Zeus, who I guess does a fine job for what this movie wanted Zeus to be. I would have loved a more serious performance. That would have been much better. But let's talk about Christian Bale, because Christian Bale is amazing in this movie. He's proven time and time again that he's one of the best actors ever, and he proves it yet again here. Anytime he's on screen, you can't look away. He looks frightening and intimidating, but Christian Bale just brings a certain sympathy to his character. And I just think that if this script was a bit better, we would get one of the best MCU villains ever here. And we don't quite get that, but we still get a really good villain, all because of Christian Bale's amazing performance. Oh, and we also got Guardians of the Galaxy, but they're not really in the movie, and the time they're all in this movie, they don't really have anything to do. So there's that. Let's talk about the visual effects, which are, yet again, another mixed bag for me. There's a black and white sequence, which I absolutely loved, and there's some great stylistic choices in this movie. But there's also lots of moments where it just looks really cheap and really bad. I think they're using that same technology that they're using in The Mandalorian, and I don't think it looks really good. It looks obviously fake, and I'm not a fan of it. And some of the costumes and some of the objects in this movie just look very cheap. Something you'd pick up from Dollarama. And let's talk about the music, because this movie uses lots of walk and roll, and it's used fine, I guess. I don't think it's used anywhere near as good as the music in Guardians of the Galaxy, but it doesn't take away from the experience. It just really has zero impact on this movie. And yeah, like, those are my thoughts. The only last thing I'll mention is that, without spoiling anything, there's an element of this movie that feels like Spy Kids, and it felt very cringy at that. But look, this movie is a mixed bag. I expected to hate it, and I did in moments, but I also loved it in moments. And it just makes for a very mixed bag. Like, this is the definition of a mixed bag. I don't know what my full feelings are, but I do think the good in this movie is going to stay with me more than the bad. The ideas it's trying to explore and the emotion that this movie is able to have is enough to win me over. It's not a great movie, the comedy's awful, but what it gets right, it really gets right. So I'm going to go ahead and give Thor, Love and Thunder a 5.5 out of 10. I just think that if Taika Waititi got rid of the comedy entirely, tidied up the script a little bit, we could have one of the best superhero movies ever made here. I really do believe that potential is here, and we don't quite get that, but what we got was better than I was expecting. But what did you think of Thor, Love and Thunder? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.